Welcome back to Retro Rebound. In today's video, we are going back to Sekiro Shadows Die Twice. There is a story behind this playthrough, that's for sure. Let's not delay any further. You see, I couldn't get into Sekiro at first. I tried once at launch and found the repeating stealth segments to drag down the experience for me. When I died, I'd run back, I'd have to stealth kill all these enemies, and I also didn't like the lack of RPG mechanics and build crafting. That's what I'd come to know and love with From Software games. A couple of years later, after my entire friend group played the game and adored it, they insisted I give it another try. Okay, fine. So the rule was that I must beat Genichiro. If I beat him, it's likely that I'll keep going anyway, but I at least have to get that far because that's the early peak in the game. After almost 20 tries after getting to Genichiro, I beat him and I didn't really feel anything. It was almost subhuman in retrospect, but the reality is I just wasn't picking up what Sekiro was putting down. This year, I played Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree. It is one of the most fantastic expansions that I've experienced, but it also represents, to me at least, a rare time where From Software got away from the fun of their difficulty spikes in boss fights and more into the annoying aspect of it. I won't spoil it, but yes, I'm mostly talking about that final fight. After my friends and I had completed this journey in Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree, they said, try one more time. Play Sekiro, it's the most balanced game we've ever played. If you didn't like what happened there with Erdtree, then you might like what's here. So I tried it again, and I got it. Sekiro is now one of my favorite games ever. It's the highest of highs, the heart-thumping combat, like all the emotion that I used to experience with difficult games, right? Where you're going through a battle and your heart starts pounding, your hands get a little clammy. That faded for me over time, and I never really recognized it until I did a complete playthrough of Sekiro, right? This is what I used to expect with the From Software formula, the barely hanging on by a thread boss fights, having my back against the rope the whole time, forcing myself to relearn game mechanics in an entirely new way. I really hadn't felt this way since Bloodborne, where all we knew before that game was shield hugging, and now this game's telling me, go at my enemy, parry them by shooting a revolver? Wait, what's going on here? Like, it was such a different speed. And I feel like I just didn't give Sekiro that same approach mentally. But that moment when it clicks, the moment you just get it, it's what I'll always remember with Sekiro, and I have a particular boss fight and moment I will point out here. But the question is, how? How did you finally get it? And it's one simple sentence that my friend offered me, and it changed my whole thought process on how I approach the game. Sekiro Shadows Die Twice is a turn-based video game. Once I thought of it that way, my parries were better. My patience improved. The ability to read enemy patterns got better. And when I was done, after the fact, video games were easier. I didn't realize this until I tried Stellar Blade again. I played the demo for Stellar Blade at the top of the year, and I got to the final fight of that demo and beat it, but it took me a few tries and I was having some trouble with some of the game's mechanics. However, I picked it back up at the end of this year after beating Sekiro, and I rinsed that boss and then the rest of the game relatively quickly. Stellar Blade isn't the most difficult title, I'm not trying to sell you on that, don't get me wrong, but there are some mechanical similarities that I did struggle with in April that I now completely flatten here at the end of the year, and I do think I have Sekiro to thank for that. My patience as a gamer is higher than it's ever been. I love a good challenge more than ever, but I am also still seeking the highs that Sekiro brought. So I know that's a very broad intro, but that was the emotional and spiritual journey that Sekiro brought me on, and it was really awesome. So I'm very excited here to share my first time playthrough with you all. As always, these are spoiler-filled videos. With every boss fight, we're going to talk about the story, recap some of that, and give some thoughts on that. So welcome one, welcome all to another episode of Retro Rebound. If you're new here and you're into nostalgic or retrospective content, consider subscribing. The story of these games really is the boss fight, so I want to just hit the main highlights here. First off, the mini bosses are all based around different mechanics you'll use. For example, there's a mini boss called the 7 Asian Spears, Shikubu Toshikatsu Yamauchi. This is really where you learn about the Mikri counter in an effective way. The way you get to this enemy, more often than not, is by Mikri countering. And the reason these mini bosses are important is they're teaching you little intricacies that are going to play a factor later on in the game with a major boss. It's never that simple, but oftentimes these major bosses are going to roll these mechanics and these ideas all into one. It's going to be another test for you. So, for example, you have the 7 Asian spears, then you have Snake Eyes, for example, will have you use your eyes, right? So normally when you see that red symbol above an enemy's head, I'm automatically dashing at them, right? Because I'm thinking, oh, Mikri counter. But that boss taught me to break a bad habit I had, which is, hey, dude, it's not an automatic Mikri every time. You got to jump that enemy. And it was there that you had to pay attention more to attack patterns and animations. And at first, this was something during my initial playthroughs of Sekiro I took an issue with, like, why isn't the symbol a different color? But it forces you to engage with a different part of the game that you otherwise wouldn't have. And that's the sign of really good design. Orin of the Water was probably my favorite mini-boss. The music, or lack thereof, really worked for me as a primer for the Corrupted Mask. But otherwise, there's a mindset, like I said, that I had to adapt to adjust my skill set that I want to explain a little bit further here, and that Sekiro is a turn-based game. That is what helped me get it. By that, I mean, it's your turn, you're gonna attack me, I'm going to deflect. Then there's a window. It's a tight window, but I come back at you. It's my turn, right? That's just how turn-based games go. Back and forth we go. Once I see you start deflecting me, once I see those sparks flying off the blade, my turn's over. The game just doesn't tell you that part, right? It's almost like a turn-based game that lets your turn run on after the fact, and the enemy can just slap you upside the face and say, no, it's my turn. That's the thing that I really understood with Sekiro. And once I got into that rhythm of your turn, deflect, my turn, deflect, repeat, all of a sudden, everything was clicking into place. I became a machine, a well-oiled machine. And it's probably because I have turn-brained itis. So, for me, it was just really easy to understand the game from that perspective. But I wanted to share that with you all, which was shared to me by one of my best friends. And it just helped me understand the game in a unique way. And maybe you'd find it interesting as well. However, to the major boss fights, right? For me, the game really started with Genichiro. This is where my last playthrough ended. I beat Genichiro. It was a hard-fought victory. I felt nothing. What do I feel this time? Well, not much again, but I think this time it's more understandable. I've been here before, I've done that, and I knew that the real hook to Sekiro for me in this playthrough was getting beyond this. However, I was appreciating the game earlier much more than I had been before. Fighting Oniwa, Ogre, all these were warm-ups, but it really again taught me about those mini-bosses that I had forgot. Like, hey, have you mastered the Mikri counter? Did Jinsuke Saze actually teach you how to deflect multiple attacks in quick succession? Good, because you're gonna need all that from the Mikri counter to the quick deflections to beat Genichiro, plus that lightning round in the final phase of the fight. Admittedly though, again, it wasn't too bad, but I was kind of ready for this, and it's not the game's fault, it's just like, hey, I've beat this guy before, like I can definitely do it again. But seeing the tricks and the little things they do to prepare the player early on, again, such a well-designed game. So after Genichiro, this is where I'm kind of in uncharted territory. This is where the game really opens up as well. So now I'm stepping into other boss fights. Next up, I want to talk about the Guardian Ape. This boss fight, man, this made me rage the most early in the playthrough because it was a sign of what was to come, which is that if you are a giant beast, if you are not a human with 2 legs and some sort of bladed object and you're attacking me with it, I'm probably gonna have trouble with you, because fighting the beasts in a game that's all about deflecting and being swift and agile, God, it's such a weird feeling. It takes so much adjusting, and especially when this dude is so disrespectful, he farts on you, man. Sadly, I did get it spoiled before actually playing this game myself, that Guardian Ape's not dead the first time around. So I was a little bit ready for that, but this second phase just kept smoking me over and over. But this is where you learn about item usage. It's not just about how can I get ahead by deflecting, and that's kind of why I don't like the beast-focused boss fights. Definitely to me, the highlights of this game are always mano-a-mano, me versus another human who has a really interesting suite of mechanics and weaponry that they're deploying on me. But when it's a big creature, and we'll get to the Demon of Hatred, I struggle to really love Sekiro in those moments. Obviously, some people will be like, skill issue, bro, but I just don't like these beast boss fights. And the Guardian Ape, you think he's bad at first, because then in the second phase, he's like, here's some terror. Oh, that's easy to run away from. But then here's some fart gas. And then here's some difficult to read attacks. And so when you're early in that first playthrough, this guy is a huge obstacle. And so I had some trouble with him. But once I got over him, I went, yep, there we go. There it is. So not gonna have to deal with that again until you have to fight him again. And then you also have to fight his friend alongside him. Miyazaki, what's going on, bro? Are you high? Why would you do this to me? So not only do I have to fight this boss that made me rage so much the first time around, I gotta fight another guardian ape alongside it. And these dudes they're relentless. They're like swinging at you, dive bombing you at the same time. Like they just don't care about attack pattern. They're gonna come at you endlessly, relentlessly. This one I did handle much quicker because this is where you gotta bow down to the goats. You go, hey, that may have been frustrating first time around with the guardian ape, but it's a me problem. Why is that? Because why is it when I fight 2 of the apes now, I beat it in like 4 or 5 tries? Oh, it's because you're getting better at the game. You know the mechanics, you know how to beat these guardian apes, you know the tricks of the trade, like, oh, these firecrackers are gonna be really good on this bad boy, but he's missing a head, but it's gonna be good on his friend. I will say the game at times has a camera issue. It's kind of unavoidable, but when you look at how the final boss handles itself and intentionally puts you in a very open space, a very open arena, like, we're not risking jeopardizing this one, versus this double ape boss fight where you do get just pushed up against the wall because these enemies are so big and jumping at you that you will get camera screwed multiple times. That was another little quip with the game that I noticed during this boss fight here. And again, why I think sometimes these beast-focused boss fights are a little more trouble than they're worth. However, where I really fell in love with this game, where I really just bent the knee and went, oh, I love Sekiro, was Lady Butterfly. For me, this was that boss fight. I feel like everyone who loves Sekiro has that run that defines it all. The one where you go through a fight mostly untouched, you're in perfect harmony with the game's mechanics, and everything is flowing just right. And that was Lady Butterfly for me. It was a simple game of deflections and dodges, but the flow and the rhythm, it felt borderline perfect to me. I just don't know how else to put into words. It felt so good. It was like I was in my own little world with this game, because I usually, when I was playing this game, would stream it on Discord to my friends because they wanted to see the playthrough. They wanted to see the live reaction, the rage, the surprises, all that stuff. This was the one moment I said, hold up, boys. I'm deafening. I need to get out of this headspace. You all do not exist. It's just me and this game. And there is a focus level that this game demands out of you. You cannot just kick your feet up. You certainly can't relax. We already knew that about Sekiro. But for me, I was definitely a different player when my mic was on mute. And I was doing it often after that point, because right there when I locked in, I just got in touch with the game and I felt how clammy my hands were, how fast my heart was going. I went, yep, this is a feeling I've been chasing for a while, and I forgot how good it felt. But Lady Butterfly really brought that out of me. And I'll just say it's a real testament to the game's core mechanics. Really, she doesn't demand a ton out of you. When she's leaping around above you, that's where things get a little touchy and you have to like jump and dodge out of the way. But really, when it comes to her basic attacks, that dance she's doing and you're just deflecting, like, it just shows how good Sekiro is on a fundamental level, that the simple L1, 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 R1, 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 just back and forth, how good that just feels on its own. And I think this was definitely, out of all the boss fights, the most fresh one for me, right? A lot has gotten spoiled for me over the years with Sekiro. So this was, to me, the moment I went, okay, that was all original and I'm seeing the strengths of the game. So let's get into Owl, right? This is the boss fight that had the most narrative impact because you're basically fighting your dad. And it's kind of like fighting yourself because he's the one who taught you, so it makes sense narratively. So he's deflecting you often. He's using items, and items that are really frustrating and cheesy, like a poison gas that lingers and it disables your healing. And then he also will back you up into it because he hits so hard. Plus, when you are staggered, he's going to use fatal attacks on you. So it's really a fight that makes you ask yourself, what would I do in this situation? And if your game sense is good, then you shouldn't have a problem with this one. And in my case, I was looking back at the footage and I beat him first try. And that was a really good feeling. That was where I was like, all right, Matt, you're great at video games. Owl first try, hello? Feeling really good about that. That was nice. But then there's Owl 2. This one has more narrative punch, as we'll talk about with the story in a little bit, because now you know he is the one who, yeah, tried to kill you all those years ago. This is one where I felt like my aggression was rewarded properly. Like, I was just in his face any chance I could get. The arena was pretty narrow, so anytime I could close the distance and go at him, I was. But overall, Owl 2 was a much tougher fight than the first one around. But now, Dearest Daddy is dead. We move on to the Corrupted Monk. We're almost there at the goated boss fight, the goat of all time. Corrupted Monk was another type of boss fight I didn't like as much, because to me, Sekiro is a game about satisfaction. And when your mini bosses are more satisfying than your, we'll put an asterisk next to this one, but kind of like major bosses, like this one's just item based. Oh, you got divine confetti and snap seeds and you've experimented enough, you're gonna run this boss over. Versus something like a Genichiro, or versus something like an Owl, which I know are the real high points of the game, but I feel like bosses such as big beast enemy like Demon of Hatred, or bosses like Corrupted Monk that are a little more gimmicky, or there was this other boss that was like in this cave, I'm forgetting the name right now, but it was in this cave and it slowed down your movement speed. Like that type of gimmick is fine because it's more mechanically based, but the ones that rely on items, it just doesn't feel like that fits what Sekiro is. Like, oh, do you have enough divine confetti? This will be an easier boss fight for you, especially because with certain fights, if you put the attack pills on, the divine confetti on, you can just run down people's stagger gauges without a problem at all. But now we're there. We're there at Ishin of Ashina. This is one of the greatest boss fights ever. 3 phases. It took me the most tries. Like my recording is almost 2 hours long just on this ending stretch of the game where I was just going at Genichiro endlessly. And the satisfaction of pulling it all together, everything you learn from the Mikri counters to the deflecting of the lightning bolts, it's literally the perfect mixture of being cinematic but also difficult and satisfying. Like the arena is perfect, the stage is set, the music is great, but it's not great enough, right? The music is not great enough. Why do I say that? All right, so here's a maniacal move from yours truly, but to beat Ishin, I had to turn off the music. The moment was getting too big for your boy, okay? Like every time I was playing, I was getting hyped up by the music. I was feeling my heart race too much. I needed to be still. I needed calmness in my life. So in the final fight of the game, after dozens of tries, I went into my system settings and I muted the music. The sound effects are still on, everything else was still on, but my reasoning, my friends were like, what are you doing? I literally said, I want to hear what Sekiro's hearing. There's no music where Sekiro is. There's none at all. It's just me, Ishin, and our blades clashing. And I needed that immersive experience. And wouldn't you know it, in under 5 tries, I smacked this fool. No problem whatsoever. But the time I got him was really close. Phase 2, oh boy, phase 2, this guy had me on the ropes. He kills me. I still have another life in hand, but it was getting spooky out there. And especially because when you fatal attack him, you're like, oh, I got him. And then you see another fatal attack opportunity and I sprint to my controller. I'm like, oh my God, no. And you have to fatal attack him again because he's blocking it. Scared the life out of me, dude. I thought Miyazaki was about to joke me when I finally got this dude. That would have made me so sad. But my heart just dropped in that moment. But when it was done, when the deed was done, boy, did it feel incredible. And that feeling hasn't quite left me. And so I needed to chase the high once more. There was one more boss remaining in my entire run through of Sekiro. And it was the Demon of Hatred. So Miyazaki, dude, bro, this is a Bloodborne boss. What is he doing here? This is an awful boss. I don't care what anyone says. You can skill issue me. You can make fun of me. I will happily take the slander. I do not care. But this is a Bloodborne boss in a Sekiro video game. I'm running this thing down. I'm hitting for its health bar. What is this, dude? But it just, yeah, I was here strictly because of ego. I beat everything in the game. I'm certainly not going to let this one go. So I spent an extra hour on this boss fight. It was worth it just to know I did everything. But then that wasn't enough. No, I didn't do New Game Plus. I went to the Gauntlet of Strength. This is the new DLC that got added to Sekiro. And what it is effectively a boss rush mode, but it also introduces new mechanics to certain bosses. So for example, your first run is going to be Oniwa, then Lady Butterfly. I'm like, okay, we're cooking. I love this mix here. And then Genichiro shows up, but he has new phases, new attacks. So Sekiro veterans get to appreciate this. People like me who are diving into this fight again, I get to see all these new things. So it's really cool to see what they have there. But otherwise, I really just sunk my teeth into all the content that's there. And gameplay wise, this is one of the most satisfying experiences I've had. So with that, let's just take a look at the story real quickly, because there was a focus here from Software. Like narratively, it was more focused than any of their other previous games. And I think that's important to call out because I think it shows that you can have the FromSoft experience and the narrative at the same time. A lot of people defend From Software's style of storytelling. I'm not here to tell you you're wrong, because I would never do that. I'm just here to say that I think there are other storytelling methods beyond item descriptions and offshoot NPC conversations that could help elevate the world and the story and in turn the boss fights. I think part of the reason the owl boss fights in this game rocked was because you were learning about Sekiro in real time by traveling back in time. And so I appreciate the narrative here. You know, Sekiro is adopted by Owl, who trains him as the wolf, and you're going to learn about that past of Sekiro further through his many playable memories. The Ashina clan is on the ropes, and Genichiro wants to use Kuro's blood, the boy who's the last of the dragon heritage line, to actually create this immortal army and fight back. So a lot of this story is about restoring glory to Ashina. And then throughout the story, you'll actually be able to talk to Ishin multiple times, which I thought was really cool. Like he's hidden in certain parts of the map, and he's sometimes masked up. So I thought that was really cool. At one point, you're actually going to find him dead. And so when he comes back, like it's supposed to be a significant moment. But again, I feel like that's where From Software is just like a hair away. Like I feel like they could deliver such a more punchy narrative, but they're kind of stuck between like, how do we make this obscure yet hardcore video game at the same time as delivering a traditional story? Anyway, you're going to end up going after an item called the Mortal Blade, which is going to let you kill like the Divine Dragon, the Great Serpent, and all these beasts that have to go down by this blade. Genichiro ends up sacrificing himself so that Prime Ishin may return and restore Ashina. That's where you fight him. I did everything so that I could get the return ending, or what people call the true ending. So what happens at the end of this playthrough, for those who didn't get the ending or haven't seen it before, is that you head west to the birthplace of the Divine Dragon. And there's been a lot of speculation. Is it like the western part of Japan? Or is a new Sekiro game being set in China? And that made me think of like Wolong, which was like Dynasty Warriors meets Sekiro. And that's a really good video game. If you haven't checked it out and you love Sekiro, it's not on that level, but if you like the build crafting of something like a Dark Souls game or Nioh from the same team, Team Ninja, and you want those Sekiro mechanics, Wolong provides that, and it's really good stuff. I love Nioh, so that game pulled me in instantly in Wolong, but I just wanted to shout that out for like me. That's where my head went immediately when it came to like, ooh, a China-based Sekiro game. I hope that's what they do. I think that would be really interesting, and I do sincerely feel like after Elden Ring, this has to be the next game, especially Miyazaki saying things like, hey, our next game, you know, we were experimenting with a diverse amount of genres. I'm like, Sekiro's not really an RPG in my eyes. Sure, you have the attributes, you have the skill system, but it's really, to me, an action-adventure game. And so I feel like that's a diverse genre compared to the open world RPGs you've been making before. But yeah, that was my journey with Sekiro in my first time ever playthrough. I adored it. I really did. I don't know still to this day how it didn't fully click with me. I feel like part of it was a mixture of psychology, but also satisfaction. I don't know if the game was scratching any itch I had at that time, because I felt like I was playing balanced games and difficult games, and I wasn't reaching for that emotion once more. Like there's been so many times I've tried to go back to the well and just unpack what I was feeling at that time, and at a certain point, it's so deep in the past, I'm like, I don't really fully remember what I was playing or what I was thinking at those times to an extreme detail, but I just know I wasn't really feeling the lack of RPG mechanics, and I think I was a little too crunchy number obsessed and couldn't just appreciate the great game right in front of me. So I'm glad I finally got to do that. Shout out to Shadow of the Erdtree for breaking my spirit so much that I would seek what I think is a perfectly balanced video game. And if you haven't tried Sekiro, well, I guess I just ruined it all for you, but it's still worth playing because you'll get an immense satisfaction out of mastering it, and you'll have your own story to tell just like I did today. Please share your Sekiro stories down below. I'm looking forward to hearing them. Other than that, take excellent care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next Retro Rebound. Peace out.